Hello, hello, okay. Okay, sorry, took me a second to set up there. The two guys on the coast emailed and said that they aren't going to be there, so I didn't have to turn the thing on today. But it was important that I set up the recording so that they can get it later. All right, I think it should be working now. Everybody have a good week last week? Yeah, good. Now, I also noticed on the calendar that we didn't have class last week. Today we'll have class, but this Thursday is fall break. So another little break. So the first thing I wanted to do is ask, now when did I make the last assignment due? The one where you had to add the little check boxes? Did I say that was still coming up? Because we basically assigned that 2 weeks from, yeah. 15th? Okay. Last Thursday. All right. I don't know if so some people probably already turned it in. I don't know what I said. Let's look here. USM. Blackboard.com. Web mapping. Web mapping. Course materials. So that would be this one. We covered in class. Change the layers to those you're choosing, and then take. Okay, so I don't know if I don't know what day I set in there, but you still have time to turn anything in. If you haven't turned that in yet. Does anybody want me to kind of demonstrate moving it one step further, or did y'all figure that out pretty well? Well, I wanted you to be able to toggle between two base maps and then turn on and off the thematic layer, whatever it was. So we had this, this was the layers control, basically adding this. So very similar to what's shown here. You can toggle on and off this layer, and you can switch back and forth between the grayscale and the streets. So I don't know if that was pretty straightforward. All right. So I can demonstrate that maybe later today if we have time, if anybody wants to do it. Sounds like you all might have figured that out pretty well. Okay, so make sure my phone's off here. Doesn't disturb us. All right. So so in this layer group tutorial, or in the layer group control, what's happening? I think I actually asked this question at the very end of the last week's lecture. What's happening when I turn cities on and off here? Or in your case, whatever layer you chose to add. Maybe I'll just go in here since it'll only take me a second. So where's the layer group controls? Yeah. So I've got my little layer control thing here. I added. Looks like this is the neighborhoods one that I added. This is the template that I asked you all to start from. So if I also added a thing like this, I'm probably not going to add all the base maps like I asked you to add, but I'll just call this default ESRI, and I will call this my so what I'm doing here is setting it up so that I have some base maps and my overlay map. In this case, I'm going to have this be the next rad. And then that should be fine, add to map. So something like that, a little bit more developed is what I wanted you to do. Now I won't have the option, because I just have default DSRI, I haven't added another tiled layer. But I can go ahead and turn off the radar layer, turn it back on, turn it off. What you saw flashing there was the other ESRI layer. It just took a while to load. See the dynamic ESRI layer that's forests. Takes a while to load here, so just don't pay attention to that for now. But my question is, what's happening when I uncheck radar and check it back on? Mm-hmm.
Draws that layer.
Right. Yeah, that's essentially what's going on. However, what the radar layer here, we don't know what other layers there are for that radar layer, and we might not be able to find out. Let's see if we can. So this is the URL for the radar layer. If we hit enter, it's probably not going to do anything because it's a map server, and we don't know what other layers are on that map server. But let's say we open that up in ArcGIS. I'm trying to see if it has any other layers associated with it. We know that actually our layer does, so let's just actually use our layer. When I say our layer, I mean the other layer. This one right here. That one has two layers. We have the neighborhood labels and the neighborhoods, right? The neighborhood labels and the neighborhoods. What if we wanted to allow the user to turn on the labels and the neighborhoods separately? Okay. In other words, we wanted to let the user turn off the labels. That could happen in real life, right? I mean, of course, you'd want the user to be able to turn off individual layers and turn them back on, right? Okay. Knowing what you know now, how might you do that? What's that? Set the layer? Two separate layers, okay? So this is one layer in WMS, and right now we have it turned on two, I guess, I don't know what to call them, sub-layers. I don't know if there's a technical term for that. It's kind of unfortunate. It seems like the companies or the providers that came up with these APIs called the big things layers, and then the sub things are also get called layers. So it gets a little confusing. Okay? But I'm gonna do what I think Nicole's suggesting real quick, just to demonstrate her suggestion, because I think it's a valid suggestion. Okay, so rather than keep confusing this this next rad layer, I'm just going to turn it off for now. I'm going to comment that line out. I'm also going to comment out the line. I'm going to change this a little bit. Say forests equals, and then change this to forests dot add to map. But I'm also going to comment this out. Okay, so it's only going to have the base map, and it's going to have these two Philadelphia neighborhood maps. So all I'm going to do is copy and paste this layer down here. So now I have two versions of the same line of code, and I can take, well, remember, what order does it draw it in? And which order do we want to be on top? Which one do we want to be on top? The labels or the polygons? The labels we want to be on top. So when do we have to add them to get them on top? Yes, they need to be further down on the code because it adds it and then it keeps throwing things on top, okay? So if it's a pancake, it puts this pancake down before this pancake. So this pancake is on top of that pancake. So what I'm going to do is change the labels and make it so that only the labels layer shows up there, and make it so that only the neighborhood layer shows up here. And I'm going to have to change the name of these layers. So I'll call this one labels. And I'll add labels down here. And so what's happened is that now I've added them as two separate WMS layers. And I'm going to write them right here and say, you know, Philly layer labels, and say comma Philly neighborhoods, and then colon and write in. Oops, gotta put both the right names. So now I should have a layer here that I can reload. And if you remember, our layers are like way up here in Philadelphia. So let's zoom way in there. They aren't showing up. What's going on? Because they should be. Philadelphia labels, Philadelphia neighborhoods. This is that other map service. I wonder what's going on. Pretty sure they were showing up a second ago. Let's make I should have saved this as something else.
Your tile layer for your neighborhoods, George, and a comma. And what else? Next one.
Oh, that is a comma. Yeah, good eye. That was exactly the problem. Sometimes it can be frustrating that a little comma like that can cause the errors. Okay, so now we have these two layers here, and I in my debugging I have commented out the line of code that created the controller. So I'm going to refresh this and zoom back in real quick. So now, the only reason why I'm zooming in is because we can't see the labels very well until we zoom in. Okay, so now I got the labels. Now I can go in here and turn off the labels. Looks like I have it backwards. And turn off the neighborhoods. So I just messed up somehow. Yes. Control X, Control V, GPH. So now it should work right. So that's, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what you were saying, right? Make two different layers. and have them show up. I don't know. They show up in the reverse order now. I think you have to show them in the same order that they actually appear, that they actually draw on the map. Control X. There we go. So now the example will actually work. All right. So now I've got my my labels drawing above my, just go ahead and zoom way in, above my other layer. And I can turn off the Philadelphia neighborhoods, or I can turn off the Philadelphia labels. I personally think that's backwards. I'd prefer if you could put the other ones on top. It doesn't look like this should be in the same order. Now you could design your own. This object right here that the pointer is pointing to, this piece of element, the elements there, how did those get created? How did that box, how did the words appear and all that? How does that happen? It's using leaflet, but leaflet is simply executing a lines of code. And so you could add your own checkboxes, and then you can make it control the drawing order differently. Okay? But you'd have to make the decision as to whether or not that was worth it. Like, it might not be worth it to you to get the layer order to draw the opposite direction, and you have to create your own. I would call this a table of contents. Well, that's what it gets called in ArcGIS. You have to create your own table of contents and have it have the checkboxes draw in a different order. But that's how it works, and that's definitely a way to do that. We have basically two WMS layers, and actually in the WMS world, there's no resource penalty for doing this at all. In other words, doing this as two separate layers consumes the exact same amount of resources as doing it for a single layer. I haven't actually demonstrated that yet, but you could create your own checkbox, your own set of checkboxes, and then send a request to this to get it to change. So let's look at that real quick. So here's the leaflet web page, right? So if I went to tutorials, not to tutorials, to docs, and then I went down to tile layer WMS. Okay, so I've got my tile layer WMS, and if I went down to the only method that's on there is called set params, set parameters. We can use this basically to modify any parameters that your WMS has, including the layers that are present. If I click this, it just takes me back up here. The reason why it takes me back up here is because these are the parameters that it's talking about. So for example, let me just show you here real quick. So I can use the set parameters method, and let's go to this the second one where we add the labels. So gph dot set params, and then inside of there, I could say layers, and then I want it most likely wants it as a Java, as a JSON object. So then I could go like this. And request both of these. I probably want to do the neighborhood second. Okay. So now I'm changing GPS. So instead of showing GPH, so instead of showing just the neighborhoods, it's going to show the neighborhoods and the labels. I'm doing that dynamically. 66, what did I do wrong? 66, oh. So I need to put it inside of the little squigglies because it's an object. Squigglies. So it's not going to look any different initially when I zoom in here. But when I go ahead and turn off the labels, you can see that the labels are included in the layer below it. Okay? So the Philadelphia neighborhoods, I've programmatically set a second layer to show up rather than doing it as two separate layers. So in order to make that dynamic so that the user would actually have to update it, I would have to add a control to the form. And adding a control like either a checkbox or something else. I think a checkbox would be most appropriate. In other words, you might want to have a checkbox that just says show labels. And if you check it, it shows the labels. If you uncheck it, it doesn't show the labels. I'm going to go ahead and file, save this as something else. Leaflet, leaf. All right. So right now we don't have any checkboxes. I'm going to say HTML checkbox. There's an HTML checkbox. This is actually the HTML code that's required. So I'm gonna put that into our HTML code right below the map. So we've got our map body. There's our map right there, and right below the map, I'm just going to add a checkbox. And instead of having it be called name, I'll have it be called labels. And then I'm going to delete the value or make it say checked, and then say show labels. Show labels. I'll show you what I'm doing here. So what I want, I thought I turned that off. There we go. Okay. Where did my checkbox go? Oh, I renamed it. That's my problem. So I'm still looking at the old one. There's my checkbox. So what I want to be able to do is when I check this box, for it to actually show the labels, but by default, the labels won't be there. So what do I need to do programmatically for this to happen? So my goal is to, instead of using two layers, like Phil suggested, I want to use a single layer. And in ArcGIS, it actually matters. In WMS, you don't take a performance hit. But in ArcGIS, every time you add a layer, it starts another service up on the server. And so you actually want, unless you're only showing 2 or 3 layers, you usually want to separate these out. All right. So what we're going to end up doing is getting rid of our GPS labels, our GPH labels here. We're going to get rid of this guy. I'll just comment this one out. Actually, maybe before we get too crazy, we'll just go ahead and delete it. All right. So we've got our labels, right? We've got our neighborhoods. Did I accidentally delete the, I did, I accidentally deleted the line where I updated it, yeah. Okay, so I want to delete this, and I want to delete this. Okay, so I want to execute this statement whenever somebody checks the checkbox on. See what I'm saying? And I want to, whenever somebody checks it off, I want to put a similar thing that'll probably look kind of like this. Actually, I'll just copy it. Control C, Control V. See that? So now this line of code will get executed when somebody checks the box right here, and this line will get executed when somebody when somebody unchecks the box. I don't know why like everybody's trying to get a hold of me right now. All right. So these are the two lines of code. We need to move these lines of code into a function that happens when. Yeah, it's responding. It's going to respond to an event. Okay. So we can go back up here and add an on-click event. On-click equals, and we can give it a function name like I'll just call it show labels. Actually, I'll just call it label toggle, because sometimes it's going to turn the labels off and sometimes it's going to turn it on. Okay, it's going to be called label toggle, and I need to create my function called label toggle. I'm just going to say function or label toggle equals function. So now it's going to only run that function when somebody executes that statement. For now, I'm going to comment this one out just to see if it works. So when somebody turns that label on, by the way, let's see. When somebody checks it, GF label is not defined. Okay. I'm also going to just get rid of this overlay control for now. Get rid of. I will comment that out so we can add it back later. So I'm commenting that out. It freaked out there because I didn't, because I deleted the layer, but I still had it added to my layer control. So right now, if you'll see, if we zoom in here, no labels, right? If I check this, it's going to run that function, and it's going to put the labels on there. Okay. If I uncheck it, right now it won't do anything because I have it just executing. The only thing that happens when it gets into this line of code is that it sets this parameter, and so it just resets that parameter each time. And we need it to actually check to see if it's checked. Okay. Yes, we need to use a conditional. Okay, so we need to use an if-then statement. All right, that's what we need to do. We need to put an if-then statement in our code. So this is a thing. And what do we need to check? We need to check to see if it's checked. Okay. We can do that by I don't think we actually need this checked value here. Oops. Okay. We can do that by using this object. I'm just going to say console.log this and show you what this is. So now I'll refresh. Now when I check, I'm not going to zoom in this time. When I check show labels, it's telling me that it's a window. Okay. This is the window that you're viewing. That's actually not the object we want. We want the show labels object. We want it to appear here as the label. Let's say the button, the check, label check. So if we change this to this, now label check will actually have the value of that checkbox. What's another way we could have gotten it? We could have given an ID, right? Like we did the first week, we gave it an ID. Then we could say document.getElement by ID. It's just another way of doing that. So now we already have a reference to that piece of HTML code. We don't have to do the document.getElement by ID. I can just, now I can say label check.value, and it should return the true or the false. So it says on, it just says on. Maybe it's not checked. Sorry. I'm getting confused. Different things have different values. Checked true, checked false. Checked true. See how I'm turning that on and off? I'm getting a true and a false every time I turn it off. Okay, the reason that it's doing that is that I'm passing with this. It's a keyword. This is a keyword that indicates that you're referring to the sending object, whatever's sending out the event. In this case, the event thing is the checkbox. So I'm the event object. I mean, I'm the object. I'm sending out an event, and I want to pass into this function a parameter called this. And this means that I'm passing myself in. I'm saying, okay, I'm being checked, and I am this checkbox button. So you're getting a reference to that inside of this function. So this function is getting a reference to that label check, and I'm asking whether or not it's checked. I used .value at first, but it wasn't the right thing to do. It was .check. So now I can do the conditional statement, like Lamar said there. So I can just say label checked and say if label check dot value or dot checked. JavaScript requires conditional statements to use a double equal sign. It's like different. So like I know some of you might have taken in different programming prerequisite courses for this course, but if like you took Visual Basic, you just to check if something's equal, you just use one equal sign. When JavaScript, you need two equal signs. One equal sign will result in assignment. Two equal signs will evaluate whether or not it's been checked or not. Okay. So if it equals true, then you're going to do something, and that is this. Else, in other words, if it's not true, you're going to do something else, and that is this. Just for format's sake, I'm going to put a tab here and a tab here, and I'm going to put parentheses. Pretty sure JavaScript likes the parentheses. So the way that you read this is you say if the label check is checked, in other words, if it equals true, then you change the layers being shown to both the neighborhood layers and the neighborhoods. If not, change the layers to just the neighborhoods without the neighborhoods. So we'll see if this works. I'll post this this code up there. So now let's zoom into Philadelphia. And by default, they're not labeled. If I check this on, I'm going to get the labels to appear. And if I uncheck it, the labels disappear. Zoom in a little bit further to show more labels. Don't know what that means. Check it on, labels, check it off, no labels. Right, so that's an example of, today's subject was something like using queries or something. But it's an example of changing it. Now, the reason why I called it using queries is because if we go back to the source, or network, yeah, back to network. Let me make this a little bit larger. And now I can't see the checkbox. If I change the checkbox, yeah, I can see, I'll just open this in a new window. The request that's made asks for the neighborhood, just the neighborhoods. So that must not be the most, does it put the most recent one on the bottom or the top? Looks like on the bottom. Let's see if I can just extend this out. We can look at the difference. That doesn't look like it's even adding to that layer. There we go. Okay, so it's asking for just the neighborhoods. If I check this, see now it's asking for the neighborhoods and the neighborhood labels. Right down there. Neighborhoods, neighborhood labels. And if I uncheck, just switch back to just neighborhoods. So it changed the query layer, the query string. That's what this is used in a URL. In a URL, this first part, the part that starts with http:// and then the name of the domain, or in this case the IP address, /geoserver/George/WMS. That's all part of the URL, and then everything after the question mark, it's called the query string. So we re-queried this layer and got a new layer based on checking this box on or off. And so that's just basically showing you two different ways that you could do the same thing. You could do it using their built-in checkbox, which requires you adding two different layers. And or you could do it or you could do it like we did the second time, where you turn the layers on and off. Now, when I say that you don't take a performance hit on WMS, you're not taking a performance hit on the server, but you are taking a little bit of a performance hit on the communication time. Why is that? In the first example, the way we first did it with the checkboxes in the corner on the control, how many images are being sent from the client to the server? Well, yeah. So there's 3 layers. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So there's the base map layer. Then there's also the other 2 layers. So there's 2 layers. There's 2. In order to show both the labels and the neighborhoods, there are 2 sets of images that get streamed from the server to the client. Now, the second way we did it, there's only a single image that gets relayed back to the server. And the server didn't have to draw both of those images separately. It just drew one of them. So there is a little bit of a performance hit, even with WMS. So I was wrong. But the difference is there's not 2 separate services running in the background. There's only one service. So with ArcGIS, it's kind of like it fires up for every layer that you add, it fires up its own ArcGIS on the server. WMS doesn't do that. it fires up a big process for everything. All the layers that are there are a single process. There's some advantages and disadvantages to both, but that's how that works. So yeah, take home is even in ArcGIS, this will perform slightly better. Although one of the drawbacks, there's a few drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is that when you check it on and off, the whole thing flashes because you're getting a whole separate image rather than just like if it was just if you did it the other way, just the labels would flash on and off because the other layer wouldn't have to be redrawn. All right, so that's doing that in ArcGIS. I mean in WMS, and you can change any of the parameters. Okay, you can change transparent, you can change attribution, you can change format, you can change some of the parameters we didn't even show, which would be version or CRS. There'd be almost no reason to change CRS dynamically based on some user event, because once a web map is established, it usually has a coordinate system and you don't change that, but same with version. But all the rest of these, you might want to change whether it's transparent. You might want to change whether or not what the format is coming back. You might want to, and you probably wouldn't change these that often, but I could see some situations where you would. Styles, okay? Styles would be something that you might want to change dynamically. If somebody checks on or checks off, you could dynamically change the way the map drew. You could have a different style approach. So you could say, you know, show this layer as red or show it as green. You have like a toggle, and then you could have two different styles on your server that would display that layer as either of those colors, for example. So that's one way you could do that. Layers is probably the most common thing that you're going to change in this way. So that's that. Now in ArcGIS, you do it a little bit differently. And let's look at this layer right here, this forests layer. I'll turn that back on, and we'll use that as an example for turning a layer on and off. So remember, when this layer loads, takes a little while. Maybe we should use a different layer because this layer takes forever to load. But that's the forest layer. And does anybody know? Well, maybe we haven't looked at that. Let's look at this real quick. So this is the forest layer. And if we open it, so it's actually running on a US government website of some sort. So I bring this up, I have all these different layers. One of the things that you can do is actually view this layer in ArcMap. I think we showed this before, but this will be helpful in order to be able to tell which layers we want to turn on and off in the first place. So, is ArcMap opening up? Yep. This was something I had up yesterday. That must have caused a problem there. All right. So this will show up, and this won't be drawing the data on it won't be the drawing data that's coming from my computer. It's going to be drawing that map service that exists on another computer far away, wherever that government computer is. There's a funny sign on Dr. Miller's door. It's like has a sad cloud and says, "There is no cloud. It's just somebody else's computer." Right. So that's really what the cloud is. It's just somebody else's computer. But it's a way to abstract and say, so this computer is running somewhere in the cloud, but it's still just another computer if it ever loads. don't know why this is taking so long. Maybe we won't wait for this forever. Okay. What I'm trying to do is turn off and on a ArcGIS layer. Let me get a layer that I know draws faster. Okay, I know these layers draw faster, and so we've got some Gulf of Mexico layers, and we'll add our Mississippi layers. I'm going to swap this out. I guess I did eventually draw, but still it's taking forever. Let's get rid of that. I'm just going to shut ArcGIS down because it's taking way too long. Close the program. Do it. And we'll change our little layers. Instead of showing the forest layers, we're going to show this Gulf of Mexico layer. Copy. And paste. We'll refresh our layers, and you'll see that nothing shows up actually. By default, I know that nothing is assigned to turn on in this for what's called forest layer. I'll just change this to GOM. So now when I add this layer, nothing shows up. I want to show one of these layers. Look, do you remember what this is called? This is called the REST interface page for ArcGIS. So do you see all those numbers next to the layers names? Remember in WMS, we had to use the actual layer names. So we said George : neighborhoods or George : neighborhood layers. Those are the actual layer names. And that's the convention in WMS, is to send a request that involves the actual layer names. In ArcGIS, that's not the way it works. In ArcGIS, instead of sending the layer names, you send the numbers. You see these numbers that are next to it? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the numbers. Okay, so if I wanted to turn on the historic oyster reefs, that's layer 15. I want to turn that on. And what do you think the kind of outline structure here means? I know everybody probably knows what it means. Anybody? Why is restoration projects to the left of TNC oyster restoration sites? Remember when we made our map services? Okay, we made our map services. Did we see any of this type of stuff? No. But how did we make our map services? What did we use to make our map service? What software product? Remember when we made a map? We used Arc. No, well, before that, how did we actually publish to the server? ArcMap. We used ArcMap. Okay, so these come from ArcMap. Okay? So inside of ArcMap, these layers right here, restoration projects, oyster restoration sites, those would be our layers inside of ArcMap. Okay. Now, this is the very first layer, the second layer, the third layer, the fourth layer, and so on. Okay, it starts at 0. That's why I'm numbering it that way. These are basically group layers. Has anybody ever created group layers in ArcGIS before? Yeah. So restoration projects is a group layer, and TNC oyster restoration sites is a layer that's under that group layer. Group layers don't really mean much on the web. But ArcGIS still carries that through. If you wanted to group them, you'd have to group them yourselves in your code to create your table of contents. But we want to turn on this historic oyster reefs. So we need to turn on layer 15. I'm curious as to whether turning on layer 15 will actually work, or if we have to turn on 14 and 15. We might have to do that because this is a group layer. So we might have to turn on the group layer and the sub layer. I'm not sure. Let's look. So if I go over to the ESRI leaflet, where did I put that? Help. I think I put that in here. All right, so here's the layers. If we want to give it a parameter, layers, it says it expects an array. Remember, arrays are just denoted by those brackets. An array of numbers. So we see an array of layer IDs. 3, 4, 5. What was the layer ID for the layer that we wanted? 15, historic oyster reefs. So let's update this code and say, I'm going to change the opacity to 1 because I think it'll be hard to see without it. And say layers. And for right now, let's just experiment and see if 15 is enough. Is those 15? Why did I forget it all of a sudden? It is 15 for historic oyster reefs. Save it. Oh, we need to put a comma there. Save it, and then go back to the map and refresh. Now we should be having some oyster reefs show up. Let's see any. Mississippi. Hopefully there are some in Mississippi. All right, they don't. It looks like they don't show up unless they're really, really small. I don't see them. So maybe let's add whatever that other number was, 15, 14. So 14 comma 15. See if that works. Oops. Huh. I'm getting an error. That's my error. I was spelling it wrong, and that's what's making it not show up. I'm almost positive. Yep. Now you can see those little oyster reefs showing up. See all those guys? Okay. So those are the oyster reef layers. I'm curious to see whether or not we need the group layer turned on or not. I forgot to check that before class. It's been a little while since I put it in practice. Okay. So it looks like we don't need that other layer on. See that? So that's kind of counterintuitive because in ArcMap, you need to turn on the group layer for the sublayer to show up. It doesn't look like that's the case in ArcGIS. So I only have the sublayer turned on. See, layer 15 is the only one I have on. I don't have 14 turned on. My guess is nothing shows up, but that's a good thing. The way I remember it is that, oh, it does show some stuff. So it's, let's see what happens if we do 15 and 16, because those are the two layers inside of that group. See what I'm saying here? So 15 and 16 is the exact same thing, okay? So it does have an effect. Good job noticing that. So if you turn on this layer, it doesn't matter whether you also have 15 or not. If you turn on layer 14, it turns on both 15 and 16, whether or not you specify 15 or 16. If you turn on just 15, then it turns on just 15. Turn on just 16, it turns on just 16. So you want to turn on everything in a group, specify the group layer number. If you want to turn on individual layers, don't specify the group layer because then it will turn on other things within that group. Okay? So that's how that's done. Let's see this. And now the last thing that I want to demonstrate today is how to programmatically turn that on and off. It should be pretty easy at this point. Let's go back to the leaflet. I don't know why I have two. I have both Internet Explorer, or sorry, Edge, and the other one open on. Yeah. Oh, actually, there's two other things I want to demonstrate. Okay. One of them is that with ArcGIS, you're allowed to pass layer definitions in. Okay. Look at the examples. State name equals Kansas, or and population 2000. What do you think that this is doing? A layer def. What do you think that's allowing you to do? Yeah, I think you're trying to say exactly what it's doing. So, right, it's a small SQL statement, and you're allowed to make queries against the attributes. You use that word. So you're allowed to make queries against the attributes just like you would in ArcMap. Like let's say I went into ArcMap. You've probably all done this before, but if I go into ArcMap and I have a layer that shows, the United States, this only work with dynamic map services, not with tiled map services. Okay. So I've got this Mississippi map in here. I have data somewhere. I thought I had voters. Doesn't show anything. Oh, I know. I put it in. Okay, so I've got this data set. Just I thought I had counties. Maybe it's up one. Nope. Let's just do precincts. Okay. So this is an example. If I had this map published, these are all the voting precincts in Mississippi. Who's done this before? Where you go in and you say properties, and you go, then you go to definition query, and you say query builder, and you say, let's see if we've got one that makes sense. County equals, these are going to be FIPS codes, so it'll be hard to tell which one's which, but we'll just select that one and say okay. I don't know what county that is even, but you know what county that is? Too many counties in Mississippi to know all of them. But that's a query definition. So now, even though we didn't delete the rest of the counties from our data set, did we? No. We're just showing the data, though, for this county. And ArcGIS ArcGIS server allows you to send the same kind of query definition to the server so that, let's say you want to allow the user to only see certain pieces of a single layer. So, we already demonstrated you can turn on individual layers on and off, but what if you also want to turn off parts of that layer and only show a certain part of a layer? That's what the query def does. Okay. So in our layer, let's go look back here. Let's say that we only want to show let's say that we only wanted to show some of these layers. You have to know about your data. In our case, it would be hard to do this without knowing what the attributes of those data sets are. But the REST interface does show us some of that. So if we went into historic oyster reefs and we went down to, we've got state, county, shape. So county might be interesting because we know what counties are on the coast, right? So we could do this and say where county equals, see if that does anything. No records found. I'm just guessing what, because they might be coded by, they're probably coded by numbers or something. But so you'd have to know about your data in order to make that work right. But you could use your query definition just to limit something about your data. So in our case, where we published the data about the data about Hattiesburg or another county, we could limit what we saw until we turned it into a tile layer. Then we can't do that. Okay, so that's a query definition. Look back here really quick. So that's a layer def. The way that you set a layer def is that it's a JSON object, and you give it the layer number. You have to put the squiggly bracket, the layer number, colon, and then the SQL statement. Oftentimes what I like to do is go into ArcGIS, create the SQL statement there, make sure that it looks exactly the way I want it to look, then copy the SQL statement into here. And that guarantees that it will work. That's this part right here. So that's how you do that. So you can put more than one query definition in for more than one sublayer. So we've got layer 5 might represent voting precincts, layer 6 might represent DMV offices. And in both cases, I want to only show them in Kansas and in Kansas. I want to apply the same query def to multiple layers and to do that there. That's a query def. We can control the query. We can control the layer definitions, and we can control the layers that get shown in ArcGIS. Both of those. We control all sorts of things: opacity, the position. Okay. But these are all examples of that happening. That happening in the code. Okay? It's not dynamic. In other words, we're hard coding in layers. What if we want to update Gulf of Mexico to show different layers? If we don't want it to show 15 and 16, we want it to show 1 and 2 based on a button that gets pressed or something like that. But we could do the same thing that Nicole suggested earlier. We could take this data set and copy it so that we would have those layers as a separate layer, or we could modify it so that a user action caused that layer to change. And the way that we would do that is by using one of these functions. So one of the functions here is called set layer def. Set layer def will allow us to change the layer definitions. And there's another one here that's just called set layers. And set layers will allow us to change the layers that are being shown. So this is the equivalent to the other one. So let's look at this real quick. Let's go down here, and inside the toggle, I'm also going to add gom.setLayers and change this from 15. Well, this has to be an array still, even if it's only a single one. So when the set layers button is checked, we're going to see 15 When it's not checked, we're going to see layer, I don't know, layer 1. See what happens there. So we're just going to toggle on and off a layer. Oops. So now we've got layer 15 on. And actually, the first time we check this, it's just going to turn on 15. So see how layer 16 turned off. By default, layer 16 was on. So I checked it the first time, it ran the code, and it only turned on layer 15. When I uncheck this, it's going to now go back and turn on layer 1. Now, checking this just will toggle back and forth between 15 and 1. That's what that does. I can do all sorts. Now that I have this ability, I can do all sorts of things. I can have buttons that turn on and off layers. I can do any of these other things. I can set layer depths. Don't worry about time options, but I can do things like identify based on a user interaction. Identify returns the data on a map. In fact, this one might be kind of cool to demonstrate. Okay. Let's just cut and paste this code right here. So this code will run, and it will return the feature data that it gets, where it clicks, for what layers are on. So let's do that. Copy. Paste this. Well, it doesn't make much sense to have this run on a like a button clicking or a checkbox happening, right? It makes more sense for this to happen when would it make sense to return information about a particular location? When does that happen in GIS usually? So this is going to return information about a particular feature on your map, a particular thing on your map. What event would trigger you getting information about a particular object, a particular thing? Mouse, like if you moused over something. Okay, now I actually had a project where somebody wanted it to do that. And in this case, we're saying when identify runs, we're making a request to the server, right? And the server is coming back with a response. So mouse over is kind of a pain because sometimes because of the latency, when you mouse over an object, you're already moused over and you're moving on before that information comes back, and it's like, what? And so that's a good suggestion lots of times for vector features that are already loaded onto the client, which we'll talk about over the next couple weeks. But for map service events like this, it's better if it's a click. In other words, if the user clicks on, let's say they click on, let's go back to our map. Let's say the user clicks on this oyster reef. We want to report back information about that oyster reef. So we can do it as a click, okay? So that's where we would put this. So let's look at the code real quick. I'm actually not going to copy over this code quite yet. This code right here. First, I'm going to create some code that will execute when the user clicks on the map. Where might I find an example of that code? Well, probably back at the leaflet site. Go to the leaflet site and say, go back up to the map. I've got my documentation, and I say map events. Okay, fired when the user clicks or taps the map. In other words, if it's there. So I want to look at that example of a map. So map.onClick function. Let's look at that and put that in our code. So I'm going to put that in our code. So now when the user clicks on our map, it's gonna have an alert. What does an alert do again? Everybody remember? Yeah, so it's just gonna create a little pop-up box. When I click on the map, it creates a pop-up box. See that? All right, so I'm gonna modify this code so that instead of creating the pop-up box, it's going to request an identify function here. Okay, so I copy this down and put it inside of this code, inside of this function. Now it's going to run that identify when the user clicks. What do I have to change in this code? Dynamic map layer. What is that? That's the name of a variable. Do we have a variable named that? Do we? This is probably from the example. We have a layer name. We have a dynamic map layer. We don't have that. Okay. This is the layer that you want to get information from. And in my case, I want to get information from the Gulf of Mexico layer. So I have to take Gulf of Mexico layer dot identify. Go up here, Gulf of Mexico. So now it's going to Gulf of Mexico identify at a particular lat long. Okay. Particular lat long bounds. Let's see what these are, because I don't even know what those numbers mean. And then once it runs, if it returns anything, it's going to show it in the console. All right. We're going to find out what these two icons mean. Let's go back and look at the help real quick. Run at lat long. We know what that is. Lat long bounds is probably the bounds of the map that you're looking at. And this is probably the tolerance. Let's see what that is. Lat long identifies a feature at a given lat long. So here it's just saying at a given latitude, longitude. Those are probably optional parameters. Why would you need those optional parameters? Okay. Well, if you're trying to identify a point feature and you just give it a latitude and longitude, you're going to have a really hard time clicking on that exact object, right? Okay, so you need to give it a tolerance. And in order to know the scale of that tolerance, you need to know how big the map is. Almost like I need a pen for this, but let's just say this this square represented the map that I'm looking at. Okay, if I was really zoomed in, if I'm off by just a little bit, then I might still be able to hit the object based on the tolerance. Or if I'm zoomed out really far and I miss by just a little bit, the tolerance will be off by more. So that's what these numbers are. Okay, the first number is the bounds, to tell it how far it's zoomed in, and then this is the tolerance, meaning how far off they can be. Effectively, it doesn't. It buffers it on the server and says, okay, I want everything within this distance. So I'm pretty sure those are optional. And since we're dealing with polygons, they're not quite as important as long as we're inside the polygon. So I'm just going to delete them for now and see if it works. To get the lat long, we can just say, I'm pretty sure we can just say e.lat long. See how it did that up here, e.lat long. So now we should be able to to get information about what we click on. So I'm going to go back over to our map, reload it, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to click right on one of these objects. Click on that guy right there. I'm going to click on it. 75, undefined. Feature collection. It didn't get anything back. It's not getting anything back. Objects that are used to identify features, you callback function. Yeah. Do you have to give it the layers? I didn't have that in the other example, but this one looks like it's asking for that. $15. Looks like it's doing it a little bit differently. Anyway, this isn't something I was planning on demonstrating today. So if we don't quite get to it, I'll show it next time. But, okay, click on it. Still got undefined. Okay, well, ignore that last demonstration, but I'll figure out what's wrong and post it before we meet next time. But we're able to turn on and off. We were able to turn on and off layers and turn them off, turn off sub layers to a dynamic map service layer. And that's what we meant to do today. So we're changing the query string that's sent so that you don't have to actually change the URL. You're just using the API to change the value of the URL string, and then it's making the request and handling the response and showing it on the map. All right, so your assignment for this time will be to modify the map that you created in the last one to show, to be able to turn on and off sub-layers individually. Okay. I don't mind whichever approach you want to use. Like if you want to use the way of creating multiple layers and turning on and off those multiple layers, you can do it that way. Or you can do it the more efficient way and turn on and off sub-layers using some sort of control that you make on the client. All right. Let's go ahead and leave it there. I'll try to figure that out. I'll post this code, and I'll be around if you have any questions as you work through your code. All right. Let me get a drink real quick. Right back.
Pretty sure. Yeah. So I'm like, when she said, no, you only need work 12, I'm just like, all those hours. All those people happily running. No, they're running 42. They're running it. Bring the falls.
I'm running right now. structure earlier. I think you're looking for the-